So in this video, we're going to be discussing this horrific clip. But before I get to the substance of the video, I just want us to completely understand that there's a certain level of dehumanization of African people that it takes to be able to tear someone who is unclothed from their home, not even allow them the decency of being able to dress themselves before you completely demolish their home. Understand that these types of actions are only done because you in this world are not viewed at as a person. So this type of dehumanization is something that is allowed, something that is condoned, because we as a people, we are occupied, we are essentially for sale to capitalist interests. And in this video, what we're going to be talking about is these types of actions being the cost of redevelopment.
Hello and welcome to African Esquire TV. I'm your host, Tierney Cherie. I'm going to go to a story out of South Africa that I thought was very interesting. I'm going to an article on BBC entitled, "Cape Town Police Suspended for Evicting a Naked Man in South Africa." 4 police officers in Cape Town are being suspended after dragging a naked man from his home in an eviction that was caught on video. Footage shows the man being thrown to the ground and stumped from re-entering the shack in Khayelitsha settlement. When he manages to break free and run into his home that was made out of corrugated iron, leaving him exposed. South Africa's housing minister, Lindwe Sisulu, called the incident inhumane. We wish to condemn in the strongest terms an act sought to degrade an individual like what we have witnessed, she said. It has no place in our democratic South Africa. In a statement on Wednesday evening, the City of Cape Town Safety and Security Chief, Richard Bosden, said that he was in the process of suspending the 4 members of the staff involved in the incident. Scrolling down some, local media reports that the part of Khayelitsha where the video was filmed is subject to an ongoing eviction order and has been earmarked for redevelopment. Only 49 homes are allowed to temporarily remain on the land until after the lockdown, Mr. Bosman said. After the removal of illegal structures, new attempts are made to invade again on a daily basis. South Africa law dictates that once a court order is secured, evictions must be conducted in a humane manner, and in some instances, such as cases where the resident cannot find somewhere secure to live, the state must provide temporary alternative accommodations. So I thought this story was interesting because a lot of what we hear about Africa nowadays is how developed Africa is. Whether you're talking about South Africa, which most people associate with being a developed part of Africa, or you're talking about West Africa, or you're talking about Kenya, you're talking about Rwanda, you're talking about Ghana, a lot of people are so thrilled about the level of redevelopment that has happened, or development that has happened. However, we don't think about the fact that development in the sense of building structures, skyscrapers, paved roads. A lot of times these developments are being done against the interest of the actual populations where the people are based. So now in this example, what we see is that a place that is inhabited by people, as a lot of these developments are whenever they actually set these places out to be quote unquote redeveloped, is actually coming at the disadvantage of people who actually have been living inside of certain places and inhabiting certain places, and yet because of this ideal of redevelopment, those people are going to be stripped from the only homes that they have. They're going to be stripped from the places where they're often raised or they had children. This is a story that happens a lot. For example, there might be a road that they're trying to build to modernize Africa, and they're trying to have a highway system, and so they'll completely wipe out and decimate communities. They'll completely wipe out and decimate villages so that they can have a big roadway, and that they can then go out to the road and say, look what we have, look what we have. Now, a lot of times these projects are being done if not almost always, by outside investors. For example, the Chinese government is a very frequent investor in these redevelopment projects. You have people, obviously American companies, European companies, that are seeing that there's benefits to them monetarily. But I say this to say that we as African people, we have to start questioning what we value. You know, do we value being able to say that Africa looks like America, Africa looks like Europe, Africa looks like China? Shouldn't there be a type of redevelopment that actually develops the common person and not just develops certain people? Shouldn't there be a type of redevelopment where African people actually are the beneficiaries instead of just being the people who get to say, oh, we get to look at something that looks nice but actually comes against my interest because now I have higher taxes to pay to whatever Chinese company did the investment. Now I have different people from outside coming into my community and pushing me out. Now I don't have anywhere that I can call a community. Isn't there a way that we can reframe the idea of redevelopment that actually benefits us as a people? And the question always has to come, what are we willing to compromise in order to look like others? This is something that happens everywhere. You always hear, oh, you know, Jamaica looks great. Look at these big hotels. Oh, Haiti's doing well. Beautiful skyscraper. Look at these things that are taught to us by the West to be cherished, taught to us by the West to be sought after, but they don't actualize a difference of lifestyle. You know, a lot of these countries that are celebrated for development, their people, most of their people, you might have a certain class of people who are considered middle class, but most of the people, the vast majority of the people are living in dire consequences. In fact, there's another article I just read, I'm going to go to it really quickly, talking about how the coronavirus is really stripping certain people, a certain class of people in Africa that we would describe as the middle class people, because they were so vulnerable to begin with. A lot of this so-called development is actually not something that sets us up in a sustainable way, but it keeps us inside of a place where we are dependent on a constant flow of income. And if anything happens like the coronavirus, then our people are right back in the position that we were before. So again, what really is development? Development in America is not what development has been posed as in Africa, because development in America wasn't just an idea of building land structures. It was an idea of creating a class of people who, based on race, where those people were able to benefit and able to pass down generational wealth to their children. Development in Africa is only actualized inside of a certain small class of people having that type of reality, while the most of the people become common workers. And yes, they have some type of means of income for some of them, but overall those people are vulnerable in that if something happens like a coronavirus, their economic potential becomes wiped out. This is an article on the New York Times. Coronavirus is battering Africa's growing middle class. From Kenya to Nigeria, South Africa to Rwanda, the pandemic is decimating the livelihoods of the once stable workers who were helping to drive Africa's economic expansion. Let me scroll down some. As the coronavirus surges in many countries in Africa, it is threatening to push as many as 58 million people in the region into extreme poverty, experts at the World Bank say. But beyond the devastating consequences, as many as 58 million people in the region into extreme poverty. That's what experts at the World Bank are saying. Beyond the devastating consequences for the continent's most vulnerable people, the pandemic is also whittling away at Africa's signature achievement, the growth of its middle class. The last decade, Africa's middle class has been pivotal to the educational, political, economic development across the continent. New business owners and entrepreneurs have created jobs that in turn gave others a leg up as well. Just one leg up. Educated, tech-savvy families and young people with money to spare have fed the demand for consumer goods, called for democratic reforms, expanded the talent pool at all levels of society, and pushed for high-quality schools and healthcare. About 170 out of 1.3 billion, again, this is not most of Africa. This is 170 million out of 1.3 billion people are now classified as middle class, which is very, very, very slender to population compared to somewhere like America. But 8 million of them could be thrust into poverty. So, okay, 8 million of the 170 million are were considered middle class are at risk of going from quote unquote middle class to being completely on the streets and in poverty. The tragedy is that because Africa is not growing fast, this collapse of the middle class could take several years to recover. Africa's middle class tripled over the past 30 years by some estimates, spurred by job opportunities in sectors like technology, tourism, and manufacturing. But now that region is facing its first recession in 25 years. Millions of educated people and urban centers could fall victim to extreme income inequality that has defined Africa for decades. And they go on to say the rising African middle class has been critical for the future prospects of African economies as they stimulate long-term growth, social progress, an inclusive and a prosperous society, and effective and effective and accountable governance. So the point I'm trying to make with this is a lot of us, we might see, beautiful structures in Africa and we celebrate them because we've been so conditioned that Africa does not look like that. Like, we've been so conditioned to think that Africa is this desert or this jungle where all the little kids are starving, all the people, they don't have shoes or whatever, they don't have money, and all they have is dirt huts. That's what we've been conditioned by the media to understand Africa to be. Now, a lot of us, as we have grown in our awareness of self, we've seen that Africa, first of all, it's never been like that continent-wide. But particularly nowadays, now that you have a lot of these redevelopment projects, it actually looks like a lot of modern American cities, especially depending on where you go. A lot of us have celebrated that instead of questioning what are we getting at what is the cost of this modernity? Are we actually benefiting from it? And as we see, the idea of the middle class in Africa versus the idea of the middle class in America is very different. The idea of the middle class in America is one where you have not just the people who are in the middle, but you have the people who actually have something to pass down, have something to retire on, have something in a rainy day. Not just, a couple months is going to kill your whole livelihood. So what we're benefiting from this redevelopment is very minimal. And I said this in a previous video that we have to really look at this coronavirus as an opportunity for us to really stand on our own. And also, since Africa has not been decimated the same way that America and Europe has been decimated, this is an opportunity for us to figure out how we can not just take care of ourselves, but actually build ourselves, redevelop Africa, and develop it for ourselves. And so we should not be so quick to try to just have the image of development. We should try to have the reality of development. Development being that the people are actually benefiting from the glamorous looks. So the people are not in poverty, standing next to big shopping malls where you can have tourists come, and the tourists come and they leave money, and so people get money from the tourism, and that's their only means of economic survival. If your only means of economic survival is tourism, instead of actually having ownership, actually having sustenance, actually having economic viability, if that's your only means of income, if that's your only means of income, then you're essentially economically not able to sustain yourself. And that's what we have in Africa. We have a lot of people who cannot sustain themselves economically. So I say this to say, what is the redevelopment going to cost us, and what is it going to take for us to redefine what redevelopment looks like? It cannot be what we've been taught, the capitalist mindset that says one person is going to come from Europe or America or China, and they're going to put all this money into building this big structure, and this structure is going to move people's homes out of the way, is going to take people who already have nothing, take the little nut they have, and they're going to be pushed somewhere else in this structure because it looks like what happens in America, it looks like what happens in Europe, it looks like what happens in China. That's going to be something that we celebrate as Africans. That's not true development. That's not true economic viability. It's not. It's that it's a symbol. It's a Band-Aid. Way to look at things, because you're just going to put a Band-Aid over this issue of not having those types of things, instead of thinking about the fact that who built that building, not just who's getting moved out of the way, who built that building, where did the money come from, is that money going to be used to put the people into debt? Instead, we need to think about redevelopment as a way for us to bring ourselves up collectively. And until we start thinking in that mindset, we're always going to have a white supremacist system, even inside of Africa. Even whenever we do have things that look like they're black owned, the fact is, if those black people are being funded by people who do not look like them, if they're not only being funded by people who do not look like them, but the building is going to benefit people who do not look like them, then the idea that this building is an accomplishment instead of a detriment to people is truly a lie to what we should be looking at as progress. So that's all I have. Bye-bye. We will see you all in the next video. The Justice Bank. So what is the Justice Bank? I've talked before about the fact that we were trying to do a bail project, but we ended up deciding to do a mutual aid fund. The Justice Bank initiative will essentially take members, and if you would pay a very low monthly membership fee. We're going to keep it low on purpose because we are servicing a people who are the most disenfranchised in this country, the most under attack, and it's not reasonable to expect that there's that someone could pay $30 a month, $50 a month, whenever you are of that group. Now, when you become a member, we're going to have a trial period, maybe say after 3 or 6 months, whatever, you are eligible to petition us for help with your expenses. Now, what type of people who are targeted from the prison industrial complex, what type of people would be eligible? Well, because we're doing a mutual aid society, that would be democratic. What we mean is that if you are a member of the Justice Bank, you would have a say in what types of, let's say, charges or offenses that you want to be covered under the Justice Bank. The idea is that all of us are putting our money in collectively because we are a target of the prison industrial complex. Every single day that we walk out, you as a black person, you are seen as a criminal in this country, and that is a fact. And we want to offer a type of protection for our people, and almost like an insurance policy, honestly, that if you do have some type of run-in with the law, if you do have a charge, a criminal charge, that you can count on a mutual aid society to help you and assist you with those types of charges.
Nowhere in the world incarcerates as much as we do. We've seen extremely high rates of exposure to the criminal justice system for African American men with very low levels of schooling. So if we think about black men who were born in the late 1970s and who are growing up through the American prison boom of the 1980s, the 1990s, the chances that they're going to serve time in state or federal prison if they dropped out of high school is about 70%. So going to prison for that group of black men with very low levels of schooling, that's become a normal life event. And that's really only happened in the last 10 years. We're at this point now where there's about 1.2 million African American children with a parent who's incarcerated. That's about 1 in 9.